Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gretchen, and today I am here with another episode of my series, Uncovering Indies. So if you follow my channel, you will know that I really do love independent presses, and I really wanted to put some of my energy into highlighting them. Indie presses are responsible for so many of the wonderful books that I read, and because they operate on such a smaller scale, they need as much support as they can possibly get. And I just absolutely want to do everything I can to get some of their books into the hands of readers. And if I can in any way contribute to that, it would really make me happy. So I figured I would do this series. This is actually the second one. My first video in the series, which I will put a link to in the description, was for Black Cat Press, and today I am excited to talk about another wonderful independent press called Tin House. So how this video will work is I will first talk a little bit about their mission and their history and any of the notable books that they have published, and then for each of them I will choose 3 books to read and give an honest review for each of them, and then at the very end I will talk about any of their upcoming releases that I might be interested in. So with that being said, let's learn a little bit about Tin House. First and foremost, this publishing house has a formal mission statement, which is to expand the boundaries of what great literature can do. They also say on their website that they champion writing that is artful, dynamic, and original, and they promote writers who speak to a wide range of experience and lend context and nuance to their examination of the world. And after reading several of their published works over the years, I can vouch that they are definitely walking that walk. So a little bit about their history. They did start as a literary magazine in 1999, and that magazine had a 20-year print run. They eventually branched out into publishing books in 2002 as an imprint of Bloomsbury, and eventually as an independent press operating out of Portland, Oregon in 2005. It looks like they publish around 24 books per year, and it spans fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. This is also a press that has won some prestigious literary prizes, including the Edgar Award as well as the National Book Critics Circle Award. And their authors have been longlisted or nominated for several prizes, including the National Book Award, the Giller Prize, the Aspen Words Literary Prize, the Carol Shields Prize, and just this year, Ledia Xhoga was longlisted for the Booker with her book Misinterpretation. Another really cool thing about this publishing house is their staff. They have a lot of heavy hitters working for them. First of all, Hanif Adorakib is the editor-at-large for nonfiction there, and he is an amazing poet and essayist. If you have never read anything from him, I highly recommend you do so. Specifically, a book that he wrote last year called There's Always This Year. I absolutely loved it, and I think that so many people feel the same way. A lot of people also are maybe turned off a little bit by it because they think that it's about basketball and that they don't really care about basketball and it's not going to interest them, but I don't care about basketball and I absolutely loved this. Basketball is just used as a conduit for him to tell his life story, and it was amazing. Highly recommend it. Another person of note is David Naiman. He also works for Tin House. That name might be familiar to you if you listen to the Between the Covers podcast. He is the host of that, and if you don't listen to that podcast, I highly recommend it. He does fantastic interviews with authors, and the conversations that he has are always top-notch. So now that we have learned a little bit about them, let's take a couple minutes to learn about some of the books that they've published that you may or may not be familiar with. First of all, we have Claire Fuller. She has written several well-known books, including The Memory of Animals, Bitter Orange, and Unsettled Ground. And then we have Morgan Talty, who brought us the fantastic short story collection, Night of the Living Res, another one that I highly recommend if you haven't given it a go. We're going to talk about Morgan Talty a little more in just a minute. You may also remember What We Fed to the Manitcores by Talia, Lakshmi, Kolluri. It came out a few years ago, and you might recognize the next one by the cover, a book called Glaciers by Alexis M. Smith, which I absolutely love the cover to this one. This is one that I have yet to read. I have heard some mixed reviews about this one, but it is still on my TBR and I hope to get to it eventually. So those are just a few options of the types of books that you will get from this press, but know that I am literally just scratching the surface. They have so many books in their backlist, and it is really worth a look to see if there are other books there that you might be interested in. Now, when it came time for me to decide what books I was going to read for this video, for me, honestly, it came down to what I had available. I have been on a journey this year to try to read as much from my own shelves as possible. So when I decided to do a video for Tin House, what I did was I just scoured my shelves to see what I had available from them, and I was able to find 3 and I went with it. Now, interestingly enough, I did start my reading for this Tin House project prior to the Booker Prize longlist being announced, and as I mentioned, Misinterpretation by Ledia Xhoga was on that list, and I could have included it in this video, but I didn't. I've already done a standalone review for that video, which I will link in the description of this video as well, and I decided to read 3 different books. So after all that, I will tell you the books I did choose. The first one that I will give a review for is a book called Scorpionfish by Natalie Bakopolous. The second one will be Fire Exit by Morgan Talty. And last but certainly not least, we have a book called The Seas by Samantha Hunt. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the reviews, and we will start with Scorpionfish. This is a book that follows our main character, Mira. She is Greek, but she is living in the States working as a professor, and her parents die, and she returns to Athens to take care of things and kind of clean up their apartment and get their, affairs in order. And once she gets there, she meets this neighbor that lives across the balcony, and he is a sea captain that has recently lost his job, and a good bit of the novel focuses on the relationship between these two characters and the conversations that they have with one another from across the balcony. Both of them are going through a lot in their life, and they are certainly grieving things. She is obviously grieving the loss of her parents, and he is grieving the loss of his job and the life that he doesn't have anymore. And through these conversations, they develop this intense bond and connection. There's also subplots in this book related to a former lover that Mira had, who just so happens to be a Greek politician. At the time that this book is set, Greece is really going through a lot of change, and there is also some political upheaval that is going on. There is a focus in the book on how the country is responding to a rise in the number of refugees that are entering their country, and as I mentioned, that is a pretty big focus of the book. It also dedicates a lot of its time on exploring art and expression, and there's also some narrative about a couple that is going through the adoption of a child. There truly is so much going on in this novel, and as I started to read it, I I was a little worried that it was going to be a little too ambitious, and I really wondered if the author was going to be able to pull it off. But in the end, I think she did a really wonderful job, and all of it turned into what I thought was a really beautiful story. And even though it was a lot, there was a lot going on, what really made me appreciate the complexities of this novel was reminding myself that life is messy. Each of us has a life, and sometimes it does feel like life is just piling it on, and no matter what we do, there is another thing just waiting around the corner for us to deal with. And that is the nature of life. We're never going to be in a situation where life hands us one problem to deal with, and then once we figure that one out, we're able to move on to the next one. And even though it did feel like these characters were going through a lot and a lot was piling up on their plates, sometimes that's just reality. And it was also comforting to know that life is like that, and that there are people in the world that feel the exact same way and are going through and people that are going through multiple challenges, and they are able to come out on the other side as well. Now, I do think that there are some readers out there that might think that there is a little too much going on in this book and that it's not realistic, but for me, I think the way that the author handled it made it feel very relatable and lifelike. And on the other side of that, I also think that it was a way for her to make her characters very rich and layered and feel more like real humans. Like I said, to me, I think it would be odd if a book had a central character only going through one thing in their life. So I really didn't mind how chaotic their lives were, and it actually led more to my enjoyment of this novel. Another thing I really enjoyed was the way that she treated Athens like a character in the novel. It was central to the plot for both its beauty and its ugliness. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She gave it to us warts and all. And I honestly feel like when she wrote this, it was with both a level of adoration, but also a critical eye for both a city and a country that she truly loves. All in all, I really did enjoy my time spent with this book, and if you're a reader that prefers character over plot, and you also don't mind getting glimpses into the messy lives of strangers, this could also be a book that you get along with. All right, so next let's go ahead and talk about Fire Exit by Morgan Talty. So this book was released in 2024, and this is Talty's debut novel. He did write Night of the Living Res, which is a collection of short stories, and if you haven't picked that one up, please do so. It was fantastic, but he does incorporate his Penobscot roots into his writing, and like Night of the Living Res, that plays a key role in this novel as well. So this book follows our main character, Charles, and Charles is a really complicated man, and he has a lot of disappointments and regrets in his life. He lives along a river, and on the other side of the water, he can see a view of a house that belongs to his ex-girlfriend and her partner and her 20-year-old daughter named Elizabeth. Early on in the book, we learn that he is very worried because he hasn't seen Elizabeth around the house for a few weeks, and what we come to learn is that his concern stems from the fact that he is actually Elizabeth's father, and this is a secret that him and Mary, Elizabeth's mom, have kept from her for years. As this story starts to unfold, we learn about all of the reasons that they're keeping that secret, and then also what happened with Elizabeth's disappearance. We also dig a a lot deeper into all of the other things that are going on in Charles's life. Not only is he dealing with the loneliness and regret of not being a part of Elizabeth and Mary's life, he is also grieving the loss of his stepfather. His stepfather was killed in an accident, and Charles is really trying to come to terms with it. And not only is Charles going through a lot, but it seems like most of the people that are close to him are also going through a lot of things at the moment as well. One of his close friends is struggling with addiction, and his mother is struggling with health issues, including dementia. So needless to say, Charles does not have a very happy life, and a lot of the things that are happening are out of his control. Charles doesn't have a support system, and with all of those things going on in his own life, he doesn't have anybody stable to turn to. This book does have a lot of sadness in it, but I found Charles to be such a likable character, and for all of the awful things being thrown at him, he still tried to do good for every person in his life. This book covers a lot of complex themes and topics, but one of the things that really stood out for me was the topic of blood quantum. If you're unfamiliar with that term, it basically determines the level of Native American ancestry that you have, and based on that value, you can access certain civil rights and government privileges or benefits like education, land, money, access to health care, etc. There's all kinds of things that are tied to that blood quantum value. All of this said, it's just another horrible thing that white men have done to Native Americans in the course of history. And this book led me down a rabbit hole learning more about this topic. And although this wasn't a pleasant subject to search by any means, I'm really glad that this book led me down that path, and it offered me an opportunity to educate myself on it. And it just goes to show how important it is to read from different perspectives, and how even reading fiction can end up being educational for a reader. Also, the idea of blood quantum in general just started to get my gears turning a little bit, especially in relation to Charles as a character, and it just raised a lot of questions for me. Questions like, do you know what your actual ancestry is, and how important presumed ancestry can be to people? Some people make their ancestry their identity, and what happens if you find out that what you thought you were is actually different from what you are? Does that change how you feel about your own identity? Does it close doors for you, like in this case with blood quantum for the Native Americans? It determines what choices you have in your life, what opportunities you have in life. And I just thought that that was really interesting. In relationship to Charles and Elizabeth, I was thinking about how our blood can tell us who our family is, who our parents are, and what if you find out that mom and dad aren't biological in the case of Elizabeth? And also, can found families be as strong as blood ties? My gears were also turning thinking about Charles's mother. You know, she was going through dementia. What types of things does our blood carry? What have our parents passed down to us? Whether they're physical ailments, mental illness, we see a lot of that unfold throughout this story as well, which I thought was really interesting. As you can tell, this book really got me thinking a lot, and I really enjoyed my time with it. I not only enjoyed the story, but I also appreciated the writing style. I also liked the way that he wrote his characters. I found Charles to be the type of character that kind of rambled, and he took us down these little rabbit holes and tangents, and sometimes he seemed to be talking about irrelevant things, but we always eventually got back on track, and it made total sense. And I was really kind of in awe how Talty was able to write such an interesting character, and it didn't bother me. It actually added a lot to the charm of Charles as a character, and he seemed very believable to me because of that. So for me, this book hit on not only plot, but also character development, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Talty does next. I loved Night of the Living Rez. I loved this one, so I think I can safely say that he is going to be a favorite author for me, and I hope that we have something new from him coming out very soon. All right, so moving on to the last book, which is The Seas by Samantha Hunt, and in my personal opinion, I have saved the best for last. And I know this book is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you like weird and moody and depressing reads, this could definitely be a great option for you. Now, I knew nothing about this book going into it. I was at a library sale a few years ago, and this book was $1, and I fell in love with the cover. I thought it was beautiful, and it was a no-brainer for me to pick it up. And I didn't read the description. I had never heard of the author, and I basically just went into it blind, and as soon as I started it, I could not put it down. This book follows a young woman. I believe she's 18 or 19, and she lives in this gloomy little coastal town in the northeastern part of the States. When she was around 9 years old, I think she was 9, one day her father just decided that he was going to walk into the sea, never to return, leaving her and her mother alone. Now, this absolutely devastated her mother, but she was holding on to the hope that her father would one day return, because he had always told her a story that they are actually descendants of mermaids and that she is in fact a mermaid herself. And of course, all of that sounds crazy, but there is this part of her that wants to believe it's true, and that there really is this magical and mythical place for her that she'll one day get to experience, and it's a place where she will find happiness. And also, the logical part of her brain knows that it's silly, but she is still holding on to that hope and that childish belief that there is a place in this world for her to be happy. Now, the other part of this book focuses on a relationship between her and a man named Jude. Now, Jude is older. He's in his 30s, and he is struggling with mental illness. He is an Iraq war veteran, and he suffers from PTSD. He has been through a lot and has seen many horrible things in his life, and it weighs on him. It is something that impacts every single day of his life. Now, the two of them have this intense connection, and she clearly cares about Jude, but Jude is troubled and he can't fully love her in the way that she needs him to, and it's just a complicated and messy and tragic dynamic between the two of them the whole time. Both of these characters have had such tough lives, and they deserve to find happiness, but they're self-sabotaging and they're standing in their way and they're thinking that they don't deserve it, and it's such a bummer. The way that the author portrayed all of these emotions that these two were feeling was incredible, and I think about these two characters all the time. This story has such a haunting quality to it, and I will be the first to admit that it wrecked me for a couple days after I had finished it. The way that this book tackled grief and mental instability and that yearning that we sometimes have for physical freedom away from people and things in our lives, but also freedom from our own intrusive thoughts, was just absolutely intoxicating to me. And I literally just could not shake this book from my brain. I finished this book back in February, and even talking about it now is stirring up all of those things again. And this book is such a mood, and I loved every minute of it. The fact that it so vividly portrayed human emotions, but it also had this whimsical quality, really made this book stand out to me. I think it's also important to mention that this is a re-release from Tin House. The book was originally written in 2004 and was re-released in 2018, and it feels like it could have been written yesterday. I love that there are independent presses that are bringing these gems back into our lives and making them relevant again. This is a book I feel like I will read again and again and again and never get sick of it, and I am so glad that I took a chance on it, and I hope that some of you will too. But keep in mind, it's a bummer, but I love a good miserable read, and this, like I said, is a book that will haunt you. The feelings will stay with you, and it is literally a depressant, and I love it for that, but I think it was beautifully done. These characters I will never forget, and I am really looking forward to a reread of it very soon. So those are just a little sampling of the books that Tin House has to offer. I am beyond impressed with this publishing house, and I know now that when I see their little logo on the spine of a book that I can trust that whatever is in between those covers is going to be worth my time. Now, as promised, before I go, I do want to take time to point out a couple of their newer releases that I am interested in. First of all, because I did enjoy Scorpionfish, Natalie Bakopolous does have a new book that was just released in August called Archipelago. It states that it will appeal to fans of Rachel Cusk, Deborah Levy, and Katie Kitamura. So that sounds intriguing to me. And also there was a debut novel just released this November called Lucky Girl by Allie Tagle-Dokus. This book is described as an exhilarating, darkly funny novel about the absurd and fleeting nature of childhood fame and the ever-evolving desire for family and forgiveness. That sounds interesting, and also that's a really striking cover, so I'm sold. Anyway, thanks so much for spending time with me and getting to learn a little bit about Tin House. I will link their website in the description below if you want to check them out further. If you are in the States and are interested in purchasing any of these books, it doesn't look like you're able to order directly through their website, but they do provide links to most preferred online retailers. I have also put the links in the descriptions to order through my personal bookshop.org affiliate link if you're interested in supporting my channel. But please, please, please use whatever your preferred method is. Also, I'm not sure if you all know this, but if you would rather support your local independent bookstore, bookshop.org, you can search for your preferred local indie bookstore, and all of the profits from the purchases you make through bookshop.org will go to that bookstore. So even if you prefer to shop online, you can still keep your money in your community, and a lot of bookstores also support ebook purchases as well, so there are digital options too. So let's support our indie presses, let's support our indie bookstores. The last thing that I will say is that I have already been reading books for my next episodes to this series, and I definitely think that I will continue doing these. I have enjoyed my time reading from specific presses. I enjoy learning about them and their history, and most of all, I enjoy sharing it. And like I said at the beginning, if I can convince one reader to pick up a book and support an indie press, that will make me happy. So I will share that I only need to read one more book from Live Right Press, Two Lines Press, Grove Atlantic, and Europa. So maybe I can squeeze in one more of these videos before the end of the year, but I do know I have a lot of other reads I need to get done, so I'm not going to make that a promise, but if I don't get to it by the end of this year, I will surely get to one very early into next year. But with that, I will say thank you again for all of your support, and until we read again, bye!